Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the Lian Li SUP-01. So let's take a look at the other parts I'm going to be building with today. For the motherboard I'm going to be using the Z790 Aorus Elite X Wi-Fi 7. For the CPU I'm going to be using Intel's 14th Gen i9, the 14900K. Keeping our CPU cool, I've got a 360mm I/O from Montech. It's their HyperFlow ARGB 360. For RAM, I've got 3 GB of Kingston Fury Beast RGB DDR5 at 5600 megatransfers per second. For storage, I'm going with a single Gen 4 NVMe drive from Lexar. It's their NM790 in 2TB capacity. Powering the whole build, I've got an 850 watt fully modular ATX 3.0 power supply from Cooler Master. It's the GX3 850 Gold. For the graphics card, I'm going to be using the Aorus Master RTX 4070. And for case fans, I'm going to be using Lian Li's Unifan P28. Okay, that's all the parts. Let's make a start by taking a detailed look at the case. So we take a look at the case. The first thing I'm noticing is just how tall this case is compared to its other dimensions. And the reason for this, Lian Li wanted to take up a minimal footprint on your desk, but still offer compatibility for large modern components. To remove our tempered glass panel, we can pull it out from the top, and it's just a matter of lifting it up and away. And our other side panel is removed in exactly the same way. Taking a look at the back of our side panel we've just removed, you'll notice there's no additional dust filters, but the holes in the mesh are quite small, and this side of the case is meant to serve as exhaust, so that shouldn't be a problem. To remove our top panel is just a simple matter of pushing it up. This time we do have a magnetic dust filter on the back of this panel. It's just a simple matter of pulling it away for cleaning. The top half of our front panel is mesh, and it can simply be pushed away from the front. Again, if we take a look at the back of this panel, we've got a magnetically attached dust filter. On the bottom of the front panel, we've got our power and reset button, and it's actually the Lian Li logo, which is the button. So we can press here for the power button and here for the reset button. The rest of our I/O is on the side of the case, where we've got 2 USB Type A ports, a single Type C port, a combined headphone and microphone jack, and we've got 2 buttons to control the built-in ARGB on our case. You're going to press the mode button to cycle through the dynamic ARGB effects, and a long press of this button for 2 seconds will either activate or deactivate motherboard sync, where you're going to be able to sync all the ARGB up with your motherboard. You're going to press the color button to cycle through the multicolor modes, and again a long hold of this button will move you over to the static colors, and again a long hold for 2 seconds will move you back to the multicolor mode. In terms of what those buttons are going to control, you'll notice we've got an ARGB strip the whole way along the front and the side of the case, and we've also got an ARGB strip on our case's riser cable. So what I want to do now is orientate you in the case, and your motherboard is going to go here, and the case is compatible with ATX, micro ATX and mini ATX motherboards. In terms of back connector support, you see we do have additional cutouts for back connector motherboards, but it is only ATX motherboards with back connectors that are supported. So you'll see our motherboard compartment is really narrow, and in terms of CPU air coolers, the maximum height supported is only 88mm, and this isn't really what Lian Li have designed this case for. It's designed for water cooling. The other problem that you're going to have is 88mm isn't enough to mount a standard graphics card, and that's the reason we've got this riser cable here, and this is a Gen 4 riser cable. If we take a look at the rear of the case, we've got 7 horizontal half-height expansion slots. We're missing 1 slot cover, and that's where our riser card is going to be installed. Now these aren't designed for your graphics card, these are designed for add-in cards, which you can then install down below your riser cable. Your graphics card is actually going to go at the front of the case with the fans facing the front. There's a bracket at the bottom to attach your graphics card to, and then we've got this support bracket for the other end of your graphics card holding it in place. On the other side of the case, we've got a fan bracket with 3 120mm fans pre-installed, and these are set to exhaust. And we've got a radiator bracket here which will accommodate up to 360 or 280mm radiators up to a maximum thickness of 76mm. So the big reason that Lian Li have gone for this particular orientation is they're keen that your graphics card, your motherboard and your CPU cooler each have their own path of airflow, so they're not going to interfere with each other. So your graphics card at the front with the fans facing here, they're going to get cool air from the front of the case, and then these 3 exhaust fans are going to be taking the hot air from the graphics card out the side. In terms of installing your AIO, they're recommending it's installed here, set to exhaust, so again the hot air is going to be coming out this side. And in terms of the intake for your CPU cooler, it's going to come through the perforations in the rear of the case. In terms of the intake for your motherboard compartment, you get this fan bracket, which is going to allow you to mount a 120mm fan on the back of the case. And the idea behind it is you're going to have it as intake, bringing air into the main compartment. It's going to provide cooling to your motherboard, and then all the hot air is going to passively exhaust out the top of the case. So hopefully I'm going to orientate your components a little bit clearer now. What I'm going to do is go through everything in detail. So the first optional step I want to show you is how to remove this pillar on the side. It will give you better access to building in the main compartment. Just remember to put it back in if you're transporting the case. So we take a look at the top of the case, there's a screw on each side we're going to need to remove, and then we're going to be able to tilt the pillar outwards to remove it. To allow us to remove the fan and radiator brackets on the side, and also allow us to pass the tubes from our radiator through to the motherboard compartment, we are going to need to remove this top panel. It's held on with 5 screws. And then when the screw is removed, we're going to be able to lift this panel up and remove it from the case. So you can see why you're going to need to remove this top panel. Your radiator is going to be installed here with the tubes up towards the top. You're then going to be able to route the tubes along here. Down here, we've got a Velcro strap to hold them to your motherboard. And obviously if you had that top panel on, you wouldn't be able to pass the water block through. So now that we removed the top panel, there's just one screw holding our radiator bracket in place. And with the screw removed, we're able to tilt our bracket out. One of the nice things about this, there's little rubber covered pegs at the bottom which are going to help hold the bracket in place while it's at a little bit of an angle, which still means you're still going to be able to go in and manage your cables with your radiator still installed. To remove it, all you need to do is lift it up. There's no real need to remove this fan bracket because we've got our 3 120mm fans pre-installed on it, but I'll show you how to remove it for completeness. So again, there's just one screw at the top we're going to need to remove. And then with our screw removed, we can tilt the bracket out. Again, it's supported on rubber pegs at the bottom, and then we just need to pull it up to remove it. So taking a look at the bracket we've just removed, you can see that our 3 fans are daisy chained together, and we've just got a single 4-pin PWM connector to plug into our motherboard to power all 3 of the fans. So with the 2 side brackets removed, you can see our 510mm Gen 4 riser cable, which has been routed through this rubber grommet at the bottom. So it's going to plug into your graphics card here. And as you'd expect coming from Lian Li, the cable management has been really well thought out. We've got loads and loads of Velcro cable straps. We've got this little plastic clip here for managing your EPS cables coming to your power supply. And again, plenty of rubber grommets, as well as our cutouts for our back connector ATX motherboard. Behind the motherboard, we've got this little controller plate here. It's held on with a screw at the top. And then with the screw removed to the top, you can simply tilt the plate out and lift away. In terms of our case cables, we've got our front panel connector organised into a single cable, our HD audio cable, our USB Type-C cable, and our USB 3.0 cable. We've also got a standard 3-pin 5V ARGB cable, which if we plug into an ARGB header in our motherboard, it'll allow us to sync up the lighting on our case's controller. And to power our controller, we've got a SATA power connector, which we're going to need to remember to plug into our power supply. So as I mentioned, we're going to be mounting our GPU at the bottom on this bracket. And to free the bracket up, there's one screw at the front we're going to need to remove. Our bracket is now free and we're going to be able to remove it by simply lifting it up. So in terms of mounting your graphics card on this bracket, Lian Li do recommend trying to mount it as far towards the front of the case as possible where it can get plenty of fresh air. This is a pretty big card and I actually think I'm probably going to need to mount it towards the back of the bracket. So all I need to do is lift the card up and slot it onto the bracket. And then we can use 2 of the large power supply screws from the case accessory box to secure the graphics card to the bracket. Because I've got such a large graphics card, we're going to need to move the support bracket all the way to the top of the case. To do this, there's a captive thumb screw at the back we need to loosen. We're then going to be able to slide the bracket all the way up to the top and tighten up the thumb screw. And we can then set our graphics card back into the case. We are able to adjust the position of our graphics card at the front both horizontally and vertically to allow us to get the best compatibility, but also to line our graphics card up with the center of the mesh panel. So in terms of the horizontal control, we've dropped the screws down through here and we can simply slide our graphics card left or right to get it lined up. If we wanted to move our graphics card down to the lower slot, it's just a matter of lifting it up and dropping the screws down through this slot. And then we're going to be able to slide our graphics card again left or right in this position. And to secure it, we're just going to put the screw back into here. In terms of graphics card support, the maximum length supported is up to 400mm. To get this, you are going to need to install it in the bottom slot. In terms of my graphics card, it's not quite that long, and I actually think it'd look better in the top slot. So all I'm going to do is slide it up into the top slot, and then we'll just center the graphics card at the front panel. In terms of securing our graphics card at the top, we have a rubber pad which is going to go on either side of the graphics card. So we just need to loosen the screws at the top, and you see that's then going to allow us to move these pads. And then if we loosen the thumb screw on the support bracket, it's going to allow us to lower it down. And then we just need to adjust all the pads. So that's the one on the back end position. I'm just going to tighten the bracket at the back. I'm just going to push the little pad at the front into place. And you can see that's doing a great job of holding our graphics card in place. Then we can install the riser cable to our graphics card. We just need to pull this little clip up at the top, line the riser cable up with our graphics card, and then once we're happy everything's lined up, a wee bit of pressure, and the cable is going to clip into place, and then we'll secure it by pushing this clip down again. So in terms of getting your DisplayPort or HDMI cable to your graphics card, we've got this little rubber grommet at the back, so we can pass our cable through it. We can plug the cable into our graphics card, and then to keep our cable organized, we've got two little clips. Normally after showing you the graphics card options, I go ahead and remove it and do the rest of the build installment at the end. For this particular case, I think I'm able to leave the graphics card where it is and do the rest of the build, so we'll see how that goes. So in the bottom of our motherboard compartment, we do have this mirror. It should give us some really cool effects looking in, but it serves a second function in hiding our SSD mounting slots. So there is a screw here we need to remove. Then we're going to be able to slide the cover towards the front of the case, allowing us to lift it up and remove it. For mounting our drives, we're going to use these screws. The thinner ones are for 2.5-inch drives and the thicker ones are for 3.5-inch drives. We're going to set one of these rubber pads onto each corner of our 2.5-inch drive, and then we can take one of the thinner 2.5-inch drive screws and secure it into place. We can take our 2.5-inch drive with the connectors pointing towards the back, line it up with the hole slots, and once we've got it lined up, just push it backwards to secure it into place. So we're going to be able to mount one 2.5-inch drive here and one here, and then the mirrored cover is going to hide them. And you can see from the other compartment we're going to have access to the power and data connectors. You can see at the bottom of the case we've also got a hard drive cage. It's probably easier to show you this out of the case. Just before we can remove our hard drive cage, you can see we've got a dust filter over our power supply's intake fan. To allow us to remove our hard drive cage, we're going to need to remove these two screws. Then with the screws at the bottom removed, there's a little lever here we need to pull up. We're then able to pull the hard drive cage towards us and lift it up to remove it. So we take a look at our hard drive cage. We've got one drive tray at the bottom, so it's just a matter of pushing these levers in, and then we're going to be able to remove our drive tray. To install a 3.5-inch drive in the drive tray, we've got these notches on each side. So all we're going to have to do is slide our hard drive into place, line it up with the notches, and they're going to secure the drive in place. If you want to install a 2.5-inch drive in the drive tray, you can see we've got these 4 holes in the back of it. All you're going to do is set your drive onto place, and you're going to use 4 of the screws with a little lip around the outside to simply screw the drive into place at the back. That's how you install a drive in the drive cage at the bottom. To install a drive at the top, the first bit is to separate the top part of the hard drive cage. You loosen this thumb screw here, slide this way, and lift it up. So if you want to install a 3.5-inch drive in here, you can see we've got these rubber pads here. All you're going to do is slot your drive into the tray, and then you're going to use the larger 3.5-inch drive screws to go into each of the 4 corners through here, securing the drive to the tray. If you want to install a 2.5-inch drive in the tray, you can see we've got these holes here. So you take one of the rubber pads and you're simply going to push it in through the hole, and then you'll notice the smaller bit of the rubber pads will come out the back. You're going to set your 2.5-inch drive into place, and then you're going to take the long 2.5-inch drive screws, pop them through here, and screw them in from the back. Our power supply is going to go down at the bottom, and the case is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 220mm. And mounting our power supply at the back should be really straightforward with a removable power supply bracket. We've got 2 captive thumb screws on the bracket, and that's going to loosen it up, and we're going to be able to fix this to the back of our power supply and then just slide the whole thing in from the back. Another nice thing to see is we've got these Velcro cable straps, which is for managing your cables coming from your motherboard down towards the bottom. The last thing I want to show you before we get on with the build is how to mount a fan at the back. And we've got screw holes here, here, here and here for securing the bracket. So the first thing you're going to want to do is fix your fan to the bracket. Then we can set our fan bracket into place on the back of the case, and we'll secure it using 4 of the larger power supply screws. So I've just put the 4 screws in very loosely first of all, because you do have a bit of variation in the position you can move this to. So it is possible to slide it all the way this way and all the way this way. So I'm just going to install it in the middle of the 2 compartments where it's providing airflow for our motherboard compartment, but also for our I/O. And I take a look down beneath our fan, you notice we've got this little cutout, and it's for our fan cable, so we can pass that through to our second compartment. We're going to be starting work on our motherboard, and we're going to be installing the CPU, the bracket for our CPU cooler, our M.2 SSD and our RAM before we put the motherboard into the case. To open the socket cover, we're going to push this lever down and out, bring it all the way to the top of the motherboard, and then we can open the socket cover up. We can lower our CPU carefully down, holding it by the edges, and there's notches at the top and the bottom it's going to line up with. If we wiggle it from side to side to check it's properly seated, and once we're happy it is, we can close the socket cover down again. If we apply a little bit of pressure here, the black bit of plastic will pop off, and we'll put that in our motherboard box for safekeeping. And then we can close the socket cover to secure our CPU. I'm going to be installing our M.2 SSD in the top slot. To remove the heatsink, we just need to push this little lever up and lift the heatsink up to remove it. We've got some plastic protection we need to remove, and there's also some plastic protection in the back of the heatsink to remove. Then we're going to insert our M.2 SSD into the socket. This little clip here is going to hold it in place. And then all we need to do is return our heatsink. And again, if we flatten the heatsink down, the little clip will hold it in place. We're going to be installing our RAM in the second and fourth slot along from the CPU, so we can open the clips on these slots. Then we can line the RAM up with a slot, and once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure, and it's going to clip into place. We're now ready to install the backplate for our CPU cooler, so we're going to make sure to use the one labelled LGI 1700. Now there is some double-sided adhesive here, it's just a matter of removing the paper to help this stick to the back of the motherboard, but this is just a temporary build for me, so I'm not going to stick it down. All we need to do is line the backplate up with the holes in the back of the motherboard. Then we're going to want to take the bag of thumb screws labelled LGI 1700, and we've got one of these to screw onto each corner. Just before we insert our motherboard into the case, we're going to need to free up our riser cable, which is held on with 2 cable ties. And then we'll just bring the riser cable down towards the bottom of the case. We can set our motherboard into place, lining it up with the standoffs at the back. And you'll notice as we get the middle standoff to go through the hole in the motherboard, it's going to help hold our motherboard in place. And then we can secure our motherboard into place with 9 of the screws with a little lip around the outside. Now it is really tempting at this stage to want to get our riser cable plugged in. The problem if we do, it is going to block some of the connectors at the bottom of the motherboard. So the next thing we're going to want to do is get our case cables plugged in. So our HD audio cable is going to go into this header in the bottom left of the motherboard, and we're going to plug it in with the HD audio text facing down the way. We've got 2 ARGB headers here, so we're going to plug the ARGB cable coming from our cases controller into one of these. We've got some system fan headers here, so I'm going to bring the PWM cable coming from our 3 fans at the back through and get it plugged into the header. And we'll plug our rear case fan into the next header along. Our front panel connectors are going to go into the left hand side of this header down at the bottom right hand side of the motherboard. So we can bring our cable through, and we're going to plug it in with the front panel text facing up the way. And then we'll just pull all the exits cable through to the back. Our USB 3.0 cable is going to go into this header here, so we'll bring it through the cutout, line it up with the header, and push into place. And just beneath that, we've got our front panel Type-C header, so again, we'll bring the cable through the cutout, line it up, and push into place. So now that we've got all our cables at the bottom plugged in, we're able to plug in our riser cable, so we've got a bit of plastic protection here, and we can remove the plastic protection from the riser cable. And then all we're going to want to do is line the riser cable up with a slot on the motherboard. And then once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure and it's going to clip into place. And then we can secure the riser cable with one of the large power supply screws. Next we've got our power supply to install and plugged in the cables we're going to need. So plugged in our 24-pin motherboard cable, 2 8-pin EPS cables to provide additional power to your CPU. I plugged in a 12-volt high power cable to power our graphics card, and I've also plugged in a SATA power cable to power our ARGB hub. We're going to want to install our power supply with the fan facing down. We're going to get cool air from underneath, so we can slide this into the case and we'll secure it into place by tightening up the thumb screws at the back. So you can see I've set our fan bracket back into place at the back. The reason for that is I wanted to get the cables plugged into the bottom of the motherboard before installing the riser cable. What I haven't done is secured the screw at the top, and the reason for that is we can just let it fall out. The little rubber pads are going to hold it in place and we can work away at the back of the case. Alternatively, if we want, we can just simply set it down, and this is what I'm going to do to give you guys a better view of things. So you see we've got this cutout here for bringing our power supply cables up through. So our 2 8-pin EPS cables are going to go into these headers at the top left of the motherboard, so we can just bring them over the top and get them plugged in. We've got a 24-pin header here, so we'll bring our cable through, line it up and push into place. And then we'll pull all the excess cable through to the back. And then we've got the 12-volt high power cable on our graphics card, so we'll bring our cable through the cutout, line it up on the graphics card and push into place. And then pull the excess cable through to the back. Then we just need to plug the SATA cable coming from our ARGB hub into the SATA cable coming from our power supply. And we're just going to leave these cables in the bottom compartment. So it does make sense for us to do some cable management now before we install our AIO, because once the AIO and fan bracket are in place, we're not going to have access to all these Velcro cable clips. Next, we can set our radiator bracket onto our AIO, and then we'll secure it into place with the short radiator screws. Then we can set our radiator bracket into place, and I'm just going to pass all the tubes through to the main compartment. We can remove the plastic protection from our AIO, and you'll see that we've got thermal paste pre-applied. Now what I like to do is just route our cables round the side of the cold plate, where they're going to be organised coming up towards the top of the case. And then all we need to do is line the water block up with the bracket on the motherboard. And then we've got a thumb screw to go onto each corner. And then we just need to tighten each corner up in turn. At the top of the case, we can plug the PWM cable coming from our pump into our CPU opt header, and then we'll just pass all the excess cable through to the back. The other cable coming from our pump is an ARGB cable, so we'll plug it into the ARGB header here. We've got the cable coming from the fans on the radiator, and it's going to go into our CPU fan header here. So we take a look at the ARGB cable coming from our pump. It does have an extra splitter cable on it, so we can take the ARGB cable coming from our fans and plug it into here, and that is then going to light up the fans. Where the fans are located in our case, I actually don't want them to light up at all. I think it's going to look much better without any ARGB on them. So I'm just going to leave this unplugged. And then I'm just going to manage all the cables with a Velcro cable strap at the back. And we've got a Velcro cable strap to help organise the tubes coming from the AIO. We can then replace the panel at the top and also our side pillar. Okay, so that's the build complete. If you don't know how to set the PC up, I have made another video that covers all of that, and I'll put a link to that video in the description. If you have enjoyed this full step-by-step PC build guide, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching.